We will proceed with our discussion and let's get to question 8, which says define the term homeostasis. And of course, homeostasis has to get associated with excretion, such that if there's any excess of any substance within the body or a cell of an organism, it must actually get removed from the body to maintain a constant internal environment for each and every cell. So homeostasis means maintaining a constant internal environment in the cells of an organism, or maintaining a steady state. So you can either talk about maintaining a steady state in the cells or in the body of an organism, or maintaining a constant internal environment of an organism, regardless of the fluctuations in the environment. So there might be some fluctuations in the environment, either within the surrounding of a cell or outside the body of an organism. Regardless of those fluctuations, the body must do what you call the necessary readjustments through what you call a negative feedback mechanism, so that a constant internal environment or a steady state is maintained inside the cells or within the cell's environment, such that no poisoning of a cell is actually able to occur, or no cell can get affected in terms of metabolism or its normal metabolic functions. Some of the ways in which the environment can actually be able to adjust or fluctuate, affecting the way a cell can perform its function, is one, when there's what you call a fluctuation in the temperature. The temperature can either rise or drop. Regardless of the environmental temperature, the body's temperature must be able to get maintained at a particular level. And the normal body temperature of a human being averagely is around 36.5 degrees Celsius. So any slightest change in that temperature in relation to the dropping or increasing must get adjusted to maintain a steady state. That means that if the temperature, for example, drops, the enzymes that speed up metabolic actions or reactions within the cell of an organism can get inactivated. And if the temperature rises above the normal temperature, and that means enzymes that can actually alter or can actually catalyze different metabolic reactions in the body of a cell or in the cell of an organism can actually end up getting denatured. So to ensure that enzymes are maximally or optimally activated to catalyze metabolic reactions in the cells of an organism, there must be a constant internal temperature that does not fluctuate to a greater extent, either inactivating the enzymes or denaturing the enzymes. Another way in which a cell can get affected in terms of any fluctuation in the environment is when there is a slight change in the level of glucose in the bloodstream. For example, when the level of glucose is higher above the normal level, look at that. When the level of glucose is lower below the normal level, then that means there must be drastic changes. For example, you'll find that the pancreas, as an organ in the body of a human being, ensures that there is an adequate secretion or production of hormones, insulin and glucagon. When the level of glucose is very high, insulin is secreted by the pancreas. Insulin converts the excess glucose to glycogen. Then glucagon, as another hormone secreted by the same pancreas, can be able to actually convert the glycogen stored in the body tissues or animal what? Muscles back to glucose. So the insulin lowers the level of glucose while the glucagon raises the level of glucose, such that the normal level is actually reached to facilitate the normal functioning of the cells, because an excess of this glucose can cause what we call diabetes. You've actually heard of this situation where people develop conditions called hyperglycemia or hypoglycemia, an excess level of glucose in the blood and a lower level of glucose in the bloodstream. So it all depends. And just to take you back to what we are discussing first in terms of the changes in temperature, you should know this, that human beings or animals, to be very specific, most of them are homoiodams. For example, mammals and bats, they are homoiodams, to mean they have to actually have a constant internal body temperature regardless of any fluctuations within the environment. And that means that even if the temperatures within the environment drops to that level where they cannot withstand that lower temperature, the bodies temperature must be able to get maintained at a particular level. Regardless of a slight drop, that temperature must be able to get raised. That's why, for example, if the temperatures drop, you'll find someone shivering. That is what you call rapid and uncontrolled contraction of the muscles to generate energy so that heat can get distributed in the body to raise the body temperature. You'll find the blood vessels constricting like the veins, not actually being able to allow the blood flow to the surface of the skin to lower on the loss of heat from the body. You'll find that there'll be an excess in terms of a process called respiration, where much of the food in your body will get broken down to produce what? Glucose. And glucose can get further broken down to further be able to give us energy. For example, the fats that get stored in our fat adipose tissue or the subcutaneous layer can get converted to glucose. The glucose can further get oxidized in the presence of oxygen, of course, through respiration in the mitochondria to give us energy, carbon dioxide, and water. That energy as a form of heat can get distributed, you see, throughout the body to raise the body temperature. So, and you'll actually find other ways. For example, the hair standing erect to trap a layer of air, and that air being a poor conductor of heat, it can be able to conserve heat, and that can be able to regulate the body temperature. So, maintaining a steady state or a constant environmental condition so that the working of the enzymes, the metabolic actions or activities carried out by the enzymes do not get affected at the end of the day. Now, stage 2 ways plants expel their metabolic waste product. For example, just in case plants have taken in an excess of water, when the water reaches in the leaves, of course in the xylem of the leaves, you'll find that that water can move from the xylem of the leaves if you've actually had a chance of looking at the internal structures of what? A leaf. From the xylem of the leaves to the spongy mesophyll layer cells, and from the spongy mesophyll layer cells into the intercellular air spaces within the spongy mesophyll region. Then from the intercellular air spaces, if there's what you call an excess heat, that water can get converted to water vapor. That vapor can escape from the leaves through the stomata to the surrounding. And that is a way in which an excess of water can get lost as a waste product from the plants through the stomata. So one way in which plants can lose whatever seems to be a waste to them is through transpiration. When the excess water from these plants is lost to the surrounding in form of water vapor to the atmosphere. Okay, number 2, you'll actually find that sometimes plants can actually be able to take in and give out gases. For example, you do take in carbon dioxide through the stomata and do take out oxygen through the stomata. Now, that means then that oxygen can be a waste product to plants. And through diffusion, you can also find plants moving an excess of this gas called oxygen. Now, oxygen can actually get used by the same plants during respiration. Why? When plants have made their food in form of glucose during the day, some of this glucose can get broken down through respiration in the presence of oxygen for these plants to get energy. And an excess of this oxygen can get released to the surrounding through diffusion by the stomata so that the animals within that environment can be able to use that gas during breathing. And the gas takes that initiative actually finding its way into the body of these animals. And of course, some wastes can get stored in some plant parts which can fall off. You've heard of a chance where you've actually been told about caffeine. That's a waste. We have what we call gamma arabica. You see, that is a waste. We have tannin. You see, we have cocaine. We have cannabis sativa. You see, these are wastes. These wastes can either get stored in the leaves or in the stems. When these plants actually die and they get removed from the environment, that's how those wastes can get removed. When some of these leaves fall off, that's how these wastes can actually get removed. So some wastes get stored in some plant parts. When these plant parts get removed or fall off, they actually get to that point of removing these wastes in the environment. And of course, some wastes can also be able to get recycled or reused again in the plant. And that can be a mechanism of how these plants can get rid of these wastes from their structures. Now we are done with that question. Explain how sunshine contributes to having strong teeth. I think you've actually been told this, that it is good that everyone, including young children, get exposed to sunlight. Why? Because the skin of a human being has 2 layers, the dermis, then the epidermis. This skin is able to synthesize a vitamin called vitamin D. Vitamin D increases the depositing of calcium ions into the teeth and the bones. And when calcium ions are deposited in the teeth and the teeth and the bones become strengthened. So it is vitamin D that speeds up, that serves as a catalyst in the absorption of calcium ions into the teeth and the bones. So once vitamin D is synthesized by the skin, then that seems to be able to serve as a catalyst, speeding up the rate at which calcium ions can get absorbed into the bones and the teeth, making the bones and the teeth to be very strong. And that actually becomes the appropriate reason as to why we actually end up having sunshine contributing to the strong teeth and bones in the body of a human being. Now, give two roles of mucus in the stomach. One, you know this, that the food enters the stomach through what you call the cardiac sphincter. Once the food enters the stomach, the food begins to move down the stomach through a process called peristalsis. You must have been told this. Peristalsis is a process where the circular and the longitudinal muscles of the stomach lining contract and relax, and that movement produced by those muscles can be able to move the food down the stomach. And the movement of the food down the stomach due to the action of these muscles can be able to actually trigger what you call the gastric gland. Gastric gland, apart from the movement of the food, can also get triggered by a hormone called gastrin. So look at that. So the food has entered the stomach through the cardiac sphincter. The cardiac sphincter has allowed the food in the stomach. Along the lining of the stomach, we have circular and longitudinal muscles. Longitudinal muscles. The muscles are contracting and relaxing, bringing out a movement called peristalsis. The peristalsis has aided in the movement of the food down the stomach. And in the process, the gastric gland has been actually triggered. And on top of that one, remember, hormone gastrin has also triggered the gastric gland. At the end of the day, gastric juice has been produced by the gastric gland. That gastric juice contains mucus, hydrochloric acid or HCl, contains pepsinogen, and renin. Mucus first lubricates the lining of the stomach, preventing that lining of the stomach from getting corroded by this corrosive acid called hydrochloric acid. Remember, acids are corrosive. They corrode, they burn parts that come into contact with them. So just imagine the hydrochloric acid in its concentrated state coming into contact with the lining of the stomach. It will actually corrode that lining. So to protect the lining of the stomach from any corrosion by this acid, what happens? The mucus creates a barrier. It serves as a barrier on the lining of the stomach, preventing that lining from getting corroded by this hydrochloric acid in its concentrated state. Again, sometimes, once this acid is available, these enzymes become activated. For example, pepsinogen can get activated into pepsin, and renin can further be able to get as well activated. This pepsin and this renin, in their active forms or not getting food on the lining of the stomach, they can digest the wall of the stomach. So to prevent again these active enzymes from digesting the lining of the stomach, the mucus creates a barrier, preventing the lining of the stomach from getting digested by these enzymes in their active form. And of course, pepsinogen is in its inactive form. Okay, these enzymes are in their inactive or precursor. We always say inactive or precursor. So they are in their inactive or precursor form while in the gastric gland. Why? Because that prevents them from digesting the lining of the stomach. But once they have been released in the stomach and acid is actually present, they become automatically activated and they can digest anything within that lining, within that environment in the stomach. So to prevent them from digesting the lining of the stomach, we need to actually have mucus creating a barrier in the lining of the stomach. So there's no indirect contact between the enzymes and the lining of the stomach. Yeah, and of course, pepsin has to actually break down proteins to peptides. You've actually been told that. Proteins to peptides. And renin breaks down a protein called caseinogen. So renin breaks down a protein called caseinogen in milk to casein. Yeah. So there's a type of protein found in milk called caseinogen. That milk-oriented protein has to get broken down to casein or card. And the breakdown of caseinogen as a protein in milk to casein or card is done by an enzyme called renin. Of course, renin is abundant in lactating mothers. See, for the purpose of breaking down the protein in the milk they're actually breastfeeding to their children. Yeah, so that's the much you're actually supposed to have today. And actually, I really appreciate for your availability in each and every time you're actually having a class and supporting our program, our YouTube channel, and all other social media platforms for the purpose of educating the whole world. Thank you so much and have a blessed evening.